special guest is Ed Kranepool.
Davey Johnson, the manager of the New York Mets.
I'm talking with Johnny Bench, and Johnny Bench, one of the great catchers of all time.
Welcome back to Kiner's Corner Revisited on SNY.TV. I'm Ted Berg, joined by longtime Mets broadcaster and Hall of Famer Ralph Kiner. Ralph, I want to take a look at an interview you did about the 1962 Mets with Richie Ashburn, the MVP of that team.
He was really the Met player of the year with that year. And a wonderful guy, and all the stories that took place that year in '62, and there were maybe 1,000. He was involved in almost every one of them, because he was the guy that instigated all the different things that are said about the worst team in the history of modern-day baseball.
The other thing you did do very well, you were a great defensive outfielder, and you also stole a lot of bases, so you had those pluses going for you too. But I think maybe the number one thing that should get you in the Hall of Fame, you played for the 1962 Mets and hit 300.
Hit 306 with that club. The MVP, I don't know whether that's good or bad, the MVP of the worst team ever put together in the history of the game. That was, but even that year was enjoyable in many respects, and I know you remember it. I loved Casey. I always said that I wouldn't want to play that year again, but I wouldn't have missed it for anything. I really enjoyed that. National League Baseball back in New York City, the fans were great to us. We had a very fine reception from the fans, and one thing about the Mets organization, I'll say that right from the get-go, with Mrs. Payson was the owner then, it was a first-class organization.
Well, you certainly helped it along, and we'll be back to talk with Richie some more about what he did with the Mets, and that'll be right after these messages.
Ralph, there's a ton there, but let's start with Casey Stengel. I mean, we know so much about his comic persona. Was he a good manager as well?
He was an extremely good manager, very bright, and the act that he put on was an act to cover up all the problems, and he liked to have fun and do things. But he was an excellent manager. There's no doubt about it. I got to tell you this story about Richie Ashburn, because it's so typical of what that team was. They had a shortstop named Edo Chacon, and Chacon would run it back for the Texas League fly balls out towards center field, where Richie played, and they would run together, and the ball would drop in for a base hit. So Ashburn got the idea that he would say "I got it" in Spanish. So he asked how to say "Yo tal Tango." Yeah, Lola Tango. And he would say that, and after a while, Chacon would back off, and Ashburn would come in and catch the ball. But when he yelled "Yola Tango" one time, Frank Thomas, who was the left fielder in the ball club, ran over and liked to kill Ashburn running into him. So it didn't work all the way around. But he was the MVP, and they gave him a boat for that, an actual motorboat. And they put it in the water, and it sunk. That was the story of the New York Mets in 1962. Without Ashburn and without Stengel, it would have been a lost season.
I mean, was that the worst baseball team you've ever seen?
Well, I was on one of the worst teams that I ever played, 1952 Pittsburgh Pirates, and we lost 112 games. But the Mets lost 120, and that was a longer season, 162-game season. When I played, we only played 154 games. But I didn't see the Cleveland Spiders, who had a team that had to be the worst of all time in Major League history.
How did you get through it? How did broadcasting, I know you said it was your second year of broadcasting. By the end, what were you talking about?
Well, it was Stengel. I mean, Stengel always gave you something to talk about, something to do. And it was done on purpose by him. I mean, he knew our problems. He knew he had a problem. He said one time, anybody that watches my team play knows there's something wrong with it. And there was no question about that. There are a lot of things wrong with it. But Stengel, it was the key to the whole thing. And we always had a story from him or by him or of him that really took over the overall picture.
But what was he like with his players? What was he like when he wasn't interacting with
A
them?
lot of players didn't like him, and Mantle, he couldn't get along with him at all. But one time when Jimmy Persall played for the Mets, and of course he was a real clown in baseball at one time, a great player, but he actually did spend time in a institution for the mental. He actually had a mental breakdown. And he hit a home run, his 100th home run in the major leagues. And he ran the bases backwards. Now, he didn't run them, he ran around backwards himself, but he ran the bases in order. And the next day, Stengel got rid of him, and he said, there's no room on this team for two clowns, meaning he was the only one that could be funny. It couldn't be Persall.
One separate note, Ashburn mentions immediately his batting average from that season. Is that something all players can do? Can you rattle off your stats from every year you played?
Well, give me a year and I'll look it up.
1950. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, you know what you did. I can tell you what year I hit my home runs, and I really can't tell you batting averages that much because I didn't play. I think they're overrated myself. I think it's more important to be on base and walk and do other things than hit for a high average. And it depends how you hit. A lot of guys get a lot of hits that don't help the team win.
Ralph, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Check us out next time on Korner's Corner Revisited on SNY.TV.